All right, here we are back again, episode 212. You've heard me say that for the last few episodes of just being amazed. Once we hit 200, I kind of just got, I don't know, it's just humbling that, over 200 coaches from literally around the world have joined us here on the Gill Track and Field Connections podcast. And we're just so happy that you have joined us here again this week to learn about this week's guest. I'm so humbled to be your host here, Mike Cunningham, National Business Development Manager for Gill Athletics. And really, my job is just to host this podcast and also to hang out on Twitter quite often as well. If you haven't connected with me over there, hit me up at Mike Cunningham over on Twitter and follow us on at Gill Athletics over at Twitter as well. But let's quit doing all this hemming and hawing this intro and let's get in today with our guest. Help me welcome from Keene State College, the wise, the wonderful Mr. Bill Edson. Bill, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Mike. Thanks for having me. This is just hugely humbling to me to be number 212. Just to be on this list is just humbling. I'm very honored. So it's great to be here. I appreciate it.
I think, and this is going to sound a little self-promoting here, but I think most people, when they build something of big, massive value and worth, don't ever see that it could be that from the get-go. And so what I mean by that is, here on episode 212, when I first started this back in January of 2020, first of all, had no clue what was going to happen in, 2 to 3 short months with COVID hitting. But, it just started out as an idea, kind of an experiment of like, there's all these bio pages on college and high school track coaches, these bios of where they've been and people they've coached. And I've always read those. I've always loved those. And I've always read those thinking, man, there's more behind these words. And with the really invention and ease of how to create podcasts, it was like, man, I want to get this, us old timers say, on wax, right? I want to get this on wax on people's journeys because they're just so unique from the quote unquote top, as we're recording today, Bill, the NCAA Division I championships just got done. So Edric Florial and Mouse Holloway, bravo to you, gentlemen. I've had Mouse is a Gill podcast alum, by the way. From those guys to the high school coach in Buda, Texas, which is just up the road from where I am right now. They're amazing people that choose to be a coach, and their stories of how they got to coaching and who helped them to become, what mentors, whether there was a coach or a fellow coach that they bounced ideas off of. And so as we sit here in June of 2023 at episode 212 and have zero speed bumps in the way, there'll be an episode 400, 1000, God willing, in the future. So I'm just, it's quite amazing. And Bill, it starts with people like you, man. I'm so happy. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with us. This is not it's busy season. There's no slowdown for you guys and gals out there coaching. So just grateful for you to be here today on the Gill podcast.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's the connections, the journeys. That's the gold, man. Your show is fire. And I've really fallen into it, and because I love hearing the stories and the journeys. That's how I am emotionally connecting with just about every guest that you have. Because of that, I can relate to them in some way. So I hope that they'll be able to relate to my story and journey too.
Yeah, no doubt. And before we get started with that journey, Bill, before we hit record here, you mentioned something that you've done with a few guests that we've had that I really would like to talk about a little bit, because I want other people to know that it's okay. So you tell us more about, you were describing, you took some initiative of some recent guests and actually reached out to them. Can you tell us kind of, first of all, why did you even decide to do that and how you did it? And did anybody reject you? Did anybody say, yeah, don't talk to me?
No rejections yet. What really, I just felt like listening to their story, we had a common connection, common ground to work off of. And that I felt like they could be a resource for me going forward. Or there was just an emotional connection, after seeing and witnessing how many people by name, I realized that my list is really small. I mean, it's really small. And so, it inspired me to start to get more involved in the greater community of track and field. I think because I am a part-time coach and I have been very compartmentalized geographically. I've kind of stuck within those regions, and I've stayed within the most available resources to me because I don't have a lot of extra time since I'm, working a full-time gig and then going right off to practice, that sort of thing. So I just realized I would like to meet some of these people and expand my network as well. I think that was the biggest thing that inspired me, was that so many people. I have a couple of good stories about some of your guests actually too. And so,
please, we got to hear that.
Oh, we'll get to it. Yeah,
okay.
We'll get to it.
Right,
it's part of the journey. So, so yeah, that's it. I just wanted to just be a better coach. When I was in the military, we used to always have this I guess principle of always improve your fighting position, or always improve, your position where you're at. And so I've taken that to heart, and I'm always trying to improve where I am as a coach as well. So,
well, I appreciate that. When we first started this back in, like I said, January of 2020, there's lots of names that kind of come out as you start thinking about, what to name the podcast, and, what's the goal of the podcast. You kind of want to name it around that. Could have gone very simple and just said, the track coach podcast, things like that. Right. But it became really apparent really quickly about connections. And, we talk about how small the world is, and we talk about how small the track coaching community is. Well, it became like, well, how do we make it even smaller? How does a part-time coach up in the Northeast, how does he or she get to know the throws coach out in California, or the sprint coach down in Texas, or the leadership expert up in Minnesota? How do we make that even easier, less scary in some parts of the world? Sometimes we get too built up around what school or what awards a coach has had, and it's like, well, I can't reach out to them, why would they want to talk to me? Well, I guarantee you, none of those people got to where they were without being the first time coach, things like that. So Bill, I'm just so proud of you, honestly, that you'd reach out to people, and I just want to use that as an encouragement for coaches that are listening today, have listened to episodes in the past. If there's a coach out there that Bill used that word, emotional connection. There was something about that story. Maybe you have a person or an athlete in common, but none of these coaches. That's why I said, has anybody rejected you? Because I knew the answer. No. Any coach who's willing to come here and spill their life out is not the type of person that is a stay away from me person. So just want to encourage you that next time you see a coach that you've really wanted to talk to and meet and introduce, and I'm always careful with that word network, because sometimes that word network is, well, what can that coach do for me? And so I want you to come more with a posture of, well, what can you bring of value to that person that you want to meet? And it could be just an introduction, just could be just, hey, I just want, maybe we should be in each other's network. May not mean anything today, but maybe in 5 years, 10 years, etc. But less going forward to reach out to that coach of, well, is there a job available? Can I get you on my resume? Those kind of things. You got to come with a posture of value first and foremost. So I wanted to make sure we brought that up. Okay, Bill, well, let's talk about your journey. At some point, somewhere, assuming that you were an athlete, maybe coaching switched for you from something that was done to you, Bill, go run this, go throw that, etc., to where somewhere in your mind it was like, well, wait a minute, maybe I could be like, this could actually be something I could do. Where does track and field start for you?
Well, I participated in track and field in high school, like a lot of folks did. I was very much grew up in a family with a mindset of track and field. My dad was a big track and field fan. He loved track and field when he was in high school, shared a lot of those great stories with me and my brother. And so when we had an opportunity to get involved with track and field and running, we did. In fact, I think 11 years old when I started to compete in road races, which back in those days, set 1975 or so, there weren't very many road races. So my brother's a few years older than me, so he was actually able to start competing at the high school level. I started watching that, and then I started competing. And my first race ever was a 9-mile road race. Yeah, my first one ever when I was 12 years old. So as soon as I finished Little League baseball, there was no Babe Ruth or any other progressive thing to happen between then and in high school. So I just started kind of running. And I did like football a lot. I played some football in junior high, but then when I went to high school, I was all in with cross country and track and field. So
that 9 mile race, do you remember when you finished? Because, some kids would finish that and be like, okay, never again. First time, last time. And some kids will be like, oh, what a challenge. I finished in X time. Well, man, I felt like I could have actually went faster in the middle and finished with a better time. Do you remember how you felt after that first race? Was it a challenge, or was it like, give me a break? I'm done. Where's the basketball? Let me go shoot hoops or something.
I mean, I actually trained for it. My dad helped me set up a training regimen. I actually trained for it. And so the object was to finish without walking. I can remember that.
Sure.
And when I finished, it was like, yeah, I did this. And then I did kind of feel like, well, I could have probably run faster, but I didn't know any better. Sure. My brother, who turned out to be an All-American high school runner, ran. The funny thing was that I got a trophy for being the youngest runner, and he got fourth place, so he didn't get anything at all. So my older brother, who got all the accolades in sports, that was the one thing I could always hold over his head, was this run ever since I was little, so
I'm sure you reminded him of that as much as you could during that time.
Yeah, I think I didn't have to.
That's a good little brother.
He was pretty ruthless. We did run 1 year together on the high school track team. When he was a senior, I was a freshman. Yeah, I didn't have to remind him that too much. He crushed me so many times, so good.
Yeah, but that race didn't crush you, and so you continue on and run in high school. How was your high school career? And when I say that, I don't mean accolades necessarily, things like that. Obviously, you can share those as well, but more of like, how was your relationship with the coaching staff as we focus on the coaching side of things here for sure?
It was a small high school in very northern New York. In fact, a small town called Ticonderoga, New York. You may have heard, if you're into history, you may have heard Ticonderoga pencils. Originally, the graphite for those pencils came from that region. They don't any longer, but the name is still on the pencil. But anyway, it's up in the Adirondacks. The largest metropolitan city closest to where I live in northern New York was Montreal, Canada. So it's up there. Anyway, it's a small town in a small county in the Adirondacks. And track and field and running became a really great way to connect and build friendships and relationships that are lasting for us. And it was just a very positive experience. I learned a lot of life lessons through the whole, I guess, the whole, I guess, procedures of practice and how to get better. And then what I think it's always been for me is everything has been like relationship based. So important to have a positive relationship, a positive experience, because that's what you can grow on, to me. And that's what we found there. I had a couple of really good friends that we connected from the time we were freshmen, and we finished, my senior year as captains together. I had two really good coaches who I guess I really didn't, I because they were good and our team was really good. You kind of take those guys for granted a little bit until you look back.
Right.
And the one coach was really good in establishing relationships. He was my cross country coach. His name is Jim Cunningham.
Sounds like a great guy.
he is a great guy. And he was really about establishing relationships and the positive experience. And the track head coach, he ended up helping with some of the specialty events that the track head coach's name is Tom Stricker. He was really good at mapping out practice sessions. And what I loved about both of them was that they didn't micromanage us. They let us work and establish our level of work ethic and what we wanted to get out of it. And we really understood what we put into it is what we got out of it.
Mm.
And then again, I had my dad on the other side too, who was not ever second guessing these guys, but just encouraging me, and with statements like, you're going to get out of it what you put into it, so double sessions sometimes, and some other things that just made us better, so I ended up being, on all conference teams and on championship relay teams, and, scoring at the championship meets, and, being a vital, I think, contributor to our success and our progress as a program. All 4 years that I was there, we won our section title. The state's broken down into sections. New York is huge. And then that had never been done before, that a school won 4 section championships in a row. We were able to do that. And in those days, you didn't run against schools of your size. You ran against schools who were in your region. So we're running against enormous schools. We're competing against enormous schools. And what I learned too, and this is all came within dinner table discussions, was the strategy of how to coach during a track meet and the importance of establishing depth. And Coach Stricker and Coach Cunningham did such a great job of establishing depth on our team and finding athletes who wanted to put the work in to be the best that we could be. And that set such a huge precedent on me on, bringing my life forward. No matter what I was doing, it was all about, just trying to get to be the best that you can by putting the effort in, and becoming the best you can in whatever you decide to do. So I was mostly a 400, 800 meter runner. I did some distance once in a while if they needed me to try to get points in a smaller meet. I did some jumps once in a while if they needed me to get some points in a smaller meet. Very much encourage my teammates. I think maybe that's kind of where coaching came in, to that extent that I was really like, I could observe what they were doing. I could see how the practice schedule was working. I could see how they put people in certain events, and how they put relays in certain events, so that I really understood where we were getting points from. And I think it has helped me establish this strategic mindset that I carry forth as a coach. I think I do a really great job finding points and creating strategy that can make our teams do the best they can, where others might not see that, so.
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to put a pin in that, because something you said earlier I wanted to ask a question about, but I do want to talk about that strategic side of coaching. That is interesting. Earlier you said, you had 2 great coaches that at the time you couldn't really see, like, wow, pretty lucky. And I'm curious, because I've heard that a lot, and I wonder, do you think that's because maybe there's a third way you're going to put it here? There's 2 things I think about. One is, you don't know, because we hear that quite often, not only with your own coaches, but with other things like, oh, I didn't know how good I had it on this XYZ team or at this job, etc. Is it because when you're in the moment, you don't necessarily have something to compare it to? So it is what it is. That's the standard. That means it's not high, it's not low. It's your baseline. Or is it because, to have peaks, you have to have valleys? To have good, you have to have bad. To have happy, you have to have sad. So do you not know how good or happy or great you have it until you go somewhere else and not have it as good? And so then again, because then it's comparison, right? You've heard of suffering by comparisons, but maybe this is where we don't know what we have until comparisons. I'm just curious your take on, kind of now, hindsight 2020, you're looking back and you're like, man, it seems like you had a great experience. It doesn't seem like you were like flippant in your experience during high school, but your face lit up when you're like, man, now that I look back, didn't realize it at the time, but boy, did I have some great coaches, and probably teammates were in that as well. What do you think that reason is there, Bill?
I think both of those things that you said, for sure. And then as you go through life and you experience the ups and downs of life itself, you look back and you just realize, how grateful you can be to the people who added something valuable to your life. And both those men added something valuable to my life that I haven't really realized it until, I would say, probably the last 5 years or so of really looking back. I think maybe even since COVID, or a little before, but certainly then I had plenty of time to, reflect on where I've come on this journey. And those two guys were a big part of it, and to the point where I reached back out to them and connected with each of them. And so, Coach Stricker and Coach Cunningham both follow my posts on Facebook. They often reach out to me and ask me or congratulate me on, my athletes. And we've regenerated a really strong relationship that I think we've always had, but I have more respect for those two men, than other coaches. And I did play basketball in high school for a couple of years because we didn't have an indoor track team. And the level of coaching that I experienced there was just the opposite, which is going to be really unique. And because when I tell you, when I first got into coaching, I got into coach basketball. I didn't get to jump into coach track when I first started.
Well, I want to explore that, but now I want to go back. So put a pin in that. I want to go back to my other pin. This is how my mind works anyway. I just get like pause there, come back here. Sometimes I forget to come back though. You talked about the strategy of coaching for track and field. Now that's super interesting, especially in light of something that happened this past weekend, or when you're listening to this, maybe last weekend at the NCAA Division I championships. And again, always easy to have 2020 hindsight, right? But also very easy to armchair. We call it armchair quarterback for football. We need a term for track coaching, armchair relay coach or something. I don't know. Because it's interesting when you talk about the strategy of coaching, because there's several different levels to that. One is the strategy of how you coach your athletes, whatever event, and how you structure it, making sure that they're peaking at the right time, things like that. And then to your point, exactly what you said there. Well, how do you put people for a meet when we're going to score points at conference or nationals or sectionals? Who do you put in where? Who do you not put in there? Who do you try to get an extra point out of this way, etc.? And that came to light this weekend with super stud athlete Britton Wilson from Arkansas. Now, Chris Johnson coaches her, Gill podcast alum, he's won national titles. He's had many great people, et cetera. And Britton maybe didn't perform in the finals as well as maybe other people would have thought. She was a clear stud in the 400 hurdles and 400, but there was 27 minutes, which I'm sure feels like 2.7 minutes in between a quarter and a quarter hurdles. And I think she finished second and seventh. First of all, let's just take off the table that she failed. She was second in the nation in the 400 to an unbelievable, the Texas girl ran, holy cow. And then she was, I think, seventh, if I got that right, in the 400 hurdles. All-American. She finished seventh in an unbelievable field. So we're going to take off that table. I kind of like that there is this discussion, this controversy, if you will, on the social media sphere about it, because that means track is important. I love when there's controversy about the Bowerman. It's it's important. People aren't yeah, who cares who they give it away to? It's important. People aren't who cares what Britton did, because it's important. I don't like any of the negativity that's coming from this discussion, but I love this topic about Arkansas could have not put her in there, and also no one knows what conversation occurred between coach and athlete. By the way, athlete could have been 100%. I'm sure of it, to be honest with you, that she was 100% on board. I don't know if I really have a question here, Bill, but I do like pointing out that coaching is not just the athlete and how do I get him or her to perform. It is also a conference and national meets of, well, how do we maximize for the team all these different people? What relay legs do they run, etc. So I don't know. Do you have anything to spout? I thought I had a question there, but you don't.
Yeah, well, I think when we look at strategy as a whole, particularly when you go into larger meets and you're trying to acquire a team championship, first of all, coaches don't have a crystal ball, right? When we took these jobs, no one gave us a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have to go on our intuition. We do have to communicate with our athlete. I'm sure they communicated. They had to, or they, they've got to sign off on it,
Sure.
Right? And, what's the objective at that time? Is it you've got a world-class athlete who's going to get so many personal accolades throughout their career. Is that the focus, or is the focus, trying to attain another team championship? And with that comes some sacrifice. And as a coach, also, you realize that, okay, with 30 minutes between events, there's going to be some compromise in performance. You just know that. And so are you taking that risk, that compromise enough to understand that, all right, I might lose some points here, but I'm going to gain them here. So cumulatively, I'm gaining points, because that's ultimately what you're trying to do, and it is so hard, number one, to get to nationals at any level. I really discovered that during my collegiate experiences as coach. It's so hard. You coach elite athletes at your level, and it's still so hard just to get there. So like you were saying, there's nothing to be ashamed about how that went down. And it just sounds like to me that they put the team first, and that's accolades amongst itself. That's the mindset that's going to bring this next level of success, and for them too.
Yeah, and you have this whole discussion, and by the way, this discussion is for like this percentage of the entire coaching body. With our sport, there's always talk of like, oh, well, are you going to go to XYZ university and burn out for your pro career? I've never heard that discussion amongst college baseball teams, football teams, etc., who also have pro aspirations among them. But in track, we seem to have this. And it's weird. We have it for college, like, oh, if you go, they're going to run you in 5 events every meet or 5 events every conference and nationals and all this stuff. But I don't know that I hear that same thing with our youngins in age group track. And oh wait, we're running them 5 events, and I don't know. It feels like it'd be more harmful in the youth group than the 18 to 22-year-old group. Okay, hey Bill, that was awesome discussion, but let's get back on track with you here. You dropped a little nugget there, because the next step is typically, okay, so where did you go to school? Where did coaching start coming into? And you dropped a nugget that you actually got into coaching for basketball first. Tell me more about that.
I did, totally by accident. When I left high school, I went to Cortland State University in Central New York, and I went on as a walk-on for their cross-country program. No one recruited me at all. I mean, I was a solid runner. I was running around 17 minutes for 5K. I was like second or third on my team, and we were a solid team. We went undefeated my senior year, and we were good for high school team, but I never was recruited for anything. But I went to Cortland State to be a teacher. And I walked on, and I was like, nobody knew me. The coach put me, I was like he put all the walk-ins in groups of like 3 or 4 for training, and didn't acknowledge me at all in any way. And, he's just, and it fired me up to want to be the best I can. So I worked super hard. And when I finished my freshman year, I was running 3rd on the team. I came in like 23rd. Like, I was beating seniors and 5th-year grads, grad students and stuff, because I just was so, I was just so inspired to want to be noticed, I guess. So anyway, my mindset was still in trying to be the best that I could be. Now, unfortunately, or maybe it's not fortunate, because I guess the outcome is I never regret it. But what happened was, when I was 19 years old, I found out I was going to be a dad.
Oh.
And so, I had a choice. Like, my parents were saying, listen, you got to finish college. We'll help you get through it. And it's like, I can't do that to you guys. Like, I took that, responsibility upon myself. And this happened. So I dropped out of college, and I joined the military. I joined the Army and went active duty Army.
First of all, why did you go to become a teacher? Mom or dad teachers? Any other family members?
No, neither.
What was the thought with teaching?
I think I just, both Coach Stricker and Coach Cunningham were teachers.
Yeah.
And some other great teachers. I think empowering others and just helping others. I mean, I think I just have a servant's heart right from the beginning. And so I just wanted to be a teacher. I loved history, so I was going to be a history teacher. And I think that was it. That's what and then I wanted to, kind of like fall in line, go and teach at a high school someplace and coach. Right. And that was my mindset.
So and obviously, having a child changes everything. Everything. I don't think you know that until you have a child. Yeah. Sitting with 2 of my own, I'm like, oh my, I I didn't have my first kids. I was 30 something. I can't imagine 19 years old, for crying out loud. How does that get, I'm going to use the word derailed, but to your point of like, things happen for a reason, and you are where you are
Yeah.
today because of this, and that's a positive thing. So you joined the military. What branch?
So I went in the Army.
Yeah.
And the Army was, I was interested in the Army. My dad served in the Army. I think probably the reason why he was actually going to go and be a music teacher, and he didn't go because of the draft. So he went in 59. He actually volunteered his draft. He went in 59 into 61. And there was another reason. My summer job was I played at Fort Ticonderoga, the Revolutionary War fort. They had a fife and drum corps there, and so my summer job was playing fife and bugle in that fife and drum corps and giving tours and then firing off artillery and muskets. The best stinking high school boy summer job you could ask for. It was awesome.
Wow.
So, but my boss was a National Guard captain. His name is Wayne Morgan. And he was a commander for a reserve special forces unit, the Green Beret, but a reserve unit. I think my interest in serving in the military, in the Army, as an option came from him and my relation experience with him, and just hearing, how he contributed in that way. Another outstanding, impressionable leader in my life. So I went in the Army, and I was originally going to go in to play part of the presidential escort called the Old Guard, the 3rd Infantry, which is a fife and drum corps. I auditioned, made the audition, was going to go and play for them. But then I realized, what if I want to stay for 20 years? What if this is something that I want to stay in? Or what if this is something that I just want to do my 4 years and get out, pursue something else? And so going in as an infantryman, playing fife and bugle and in a presidential escort detachment probably wasn't going to land me a sustainable position going forward to support my family. So I decided to go into the medical field, and I became what was called an operating room specialist, which is a surgical technician and assistant. And I was always interested in that, in medicine too. I was a student athletic trainer in high school. I took some courses that they offered and learned how to do basic taping and some other things. So it's very much, I just love sports in any aspect I could be involved in it. So so I joined the Army.
And I know there are some availability of options for track and field in the Army, but is track and field just paused now at this point?
No, well, no, not really,
Okay.
because running is a part of the everyday life in the military. The physical fitness element that you do every day, there's always a running component to it. So I was able to continue running, and I loved it. A couple of years into my experience in the Army, I was stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. They had a cross country. They started cross country, all Army cross country program, where they wanted to have an all Army championships from all Army bases across. They wanted to get the best runners from each base to the championships and then let them duke it out, and this was part of their, I think, world-class development program that they have. And so running in, segueing into cross country, they did it according to unit, and then it was like a tournament almost. The first competition was by unit. So I gathered up 5 or 6 of other folks in my unit who like to run, and I essentially coached our cross country team at the unit level, which was a field hospital. So we ran a lot, and did pretty well with that. At Fort Bragg, they go from unit level, then they go brigade level, then go division level. So there's like three different. You have to finish in the top percentage in order to keep going. And then if you're in the top, I think 30, then you go to all Army. Well, they start with 12,000 runners. 12,000.
I was going to ask what kind of number when you talk about units.
That's 12,000 at Fort Bragg. Okay, so they have all these mini meets all over the place. Then the winners come, and then they, just kind of like filter them down. So, to make a long story a little longer, I actually ended up qualifying for all Army.
Wow.
So I kept running in that regard, and I think I did. Kind of as an athlete coach, I wasn't, just more of a organizer than I felt like I was a coach. But that's really kind of, I think, planted the seed there. And then I tried out for their track team, and man, the quality of athletes at that place was unbelievable. I could not hang with them on the track. Put me on a cross country course where it kind of levels the playing field.
Yeah.
There's guys that were running workouts that were faster than my PR.
Wow.
I have to like run a PR every day just to keep up with them. It's like I could not hang with their track program, so I just stayed running.
Stay with cross country.
Stayed with cross country and road racing. I got a little bit into triathlon towards the end, and I actually ended up expanding on cycling more, and ended up racing in the U.S. Cycling Federation for a little while. Just loved the competition, right? Yeah. I just loved it. And cross country 400 was like my favorite event because it was more like, well, if you're going to beat me, you're going to have to hurt pretty hard to beat me. So it was more like how much pain can I inflict on my opponent, knock them down, so that I can, try to beat them. So that was the same in cycling. It's the same, in some other things. So that's why I think I just love those sports. So, that's, but when I got out of the Army, I decided to leave the active duty Army. I stayed reserves. And
how long were you active duty?
I was active duty for 4 years at that stint.
Okay.
I went back active duty towards the end of my career when I got deployed to Iraq.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So 4 years then I came off, ended up getting remarried. You get married and you try life so young, you grow apart, things happen. Never lost connection with my children, and that's all that really mattered. And met my current wife, who now we've been together almost 33 years. So at one point, between the two of us, we raised 5 children. So we inherited this, 4 kids, and we had one of our own. Wow. Anyway, one day, our first child, the son that of the story, he was in 4th grade at the time. We were then living in Vermont. We put him in a rec basketball league, just for some structure. I mean, he's a 4-year-old high energy kid, a little bit of structure, maybe learn some skills. He seemed interested in playing basketball. I liked basketball, when I was growing up. And so yeah, why don't you, we try it. So we entered him into a rec program. One day I stopped by just to see how things were going, a little early from normal pickup time. So I poked my head in the gym, and it was chaos. The program was supposed to have been run by an all well-intended community service by some college athletes, right. Some college kids. I don't even know if they were athletes actually. And they couldn't handle it. And it got out of hand and turned into just kind of playtime. Mm-hmm. And when I looked over and saw one of the boys, not my son, literally climbing up and on top of the support bracket of the basketball rim and trying to shimmy up the pole to get to the rafters of the gymnasium, I was like, this is not what I signed our son up for. So I went to the rec director to just talk to him about, what's going on, and he says, well, I do know, but I don't have any other choice. There's nobody else who will take the program over. Right. So I said, I'll do it. I'll take the program over.
First of all, bravo to you, because plenty of people, and I'm gonna use the complain word. I'm not, what you described there doesn't seem like complain. It seems like safety. First of all,
yes.
But plenty of people will complain, but then well, I don't want to, I just want you to do it, So for you to do that and then say, okay, fine, then I'll take it over. I'll lead here. That's bravo. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So I took over a program of 45 third and fourth grade boys.
Dude, a second bravo, because my kids grew up through the t-ball and basketball. I can't do it. And so I made sure that since I will not be that dad that will volunteer to coach a bunch of third, fourth, fifth, whatever. I can't do it. So after every practice and every game, I go up to the coach and be like, hey, thank you. Like, God bless you, because I can't do this. So thank you for doing it. How did you? I mean, it's, what's that term? Herding cats. It's like
Yeah,
herding feral cats.
it was. It was. I broke it down into 4 teams of 15, or 3 teams of 15. They each had their own identity. I tried to have level abilities, and added structure and expectations and discipline, and created a program for them that they could get something out of, and created a schedule for them. And then at the end of the year, we made an all-star team, and we chose basically 5 kids from each squad. Right. And then we went to kind of a local AAU type tournament with those kids, and they did really well. They ended up winning the whole thing.
Wow.
And from that moment, though, I could see the personal growth and the change in them, and the parents who said, who would come and say, Johnny has grown so much, and he's so much better behaved at home because of this, or I've been trying to say this forever, but you say it once and he does it. And I said, well, it's resonating with him because it's a different voice, but it's also staying with him because you've said it for so much. So we're kind of a team here,
yeah, for sure.
And so that's, I've heard that 1,000 times if I heard it once from parents throughout my career. So I recognize what I brought to them was valuable life lessons. And from that point, it was like I was hooked. I was hooked on it. The very next year,
you stole the words from my mouth. I was going to ask you, is this the setting of the hook? There's something to get hooked, but there's a little bit of like, it has to, like, if you fisherman, it has to actually catch. Is this like the first of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is why I was put on this earth?
Yes, for sure. And the very next year, I was hired as a high school coach to coach in their varsity or the junior varsity levels, to build players up for their varsity teams. That's so the very next year. And what I learned early too was I never focused on the X's and O's. Of course, I did my research on it, but what I focused on was what makes a successful coach. Like, who do I want to, I want to understand what people's mindsets are. What are the commonalities between of successful coaches? And I looked up right away. There's 3 guys that I studied them, and that was Mike Krzyzewski, John Wooden, and Rick Pitino. Now we can argue Rick Pitino now, knowing what we know in his journey, but back then they all had books out, and I read them. Of course, we didn't have much for internet in those days, back in the 90s, early 90s. And they all had books out. Krzyzewski was Leading with the Heart. Pitino's was Success is a Choice. John Wooden's had several books out. And the one I just wrote that I read was just one called Wooden. And it had a lot of his philosophies, his pyramid of success, and, all the stuff that is kind of all like, anyone who studies coaching knows about John Wooden. So
do we have the equivalent in track world? Because, when you talk about leaders, and a lot of those 3 gentlemen you just mentioned in their books are, if I asked 100 people to list 10 leadership books, invariably half of them are going to pick one of these people or one of their books. But, being such a track coach advocate as I am, I think about, like, wait a minute, I can name 100 coaches on track coaches that, boy, I'd like to know their philosophy, but I don't know that we have that. I don't know that we have the I'm trying to think some of the legacy coaches, Art Venegas or
Jumbo Elliott, maybe.
Yeah, Jumbo. There's a good one. I'm trying to think of the coach out in UCLA, Jim Bush or something, like legacy, Brooks Johnson and George Williams would be in there as well, Gill podcast alums. I don't know that I can't think of a single book of leadership that was written by a coach. There's got to be some I'm missing, I'm sure, but I can't think of Like, oh, you want to know about leadership? Read this book.
Yeah, I don't know if there really is, to be honest,
Yeah.
at that level.
That's a miss. That's a miss.
Yeah, it is.
I've said this before. I am convinced, because of the leadership of track and field coaches, that they could take over a sport that they know nothing about the X's and O's, and that team would be very successful. I use the example, I don't know why it came to me, but I used Jerry Baltus at Grand Valley State, and I go, I'm convinced that if Jerry Baltus was put in charge of a hockey team, and I don't know if JB knows or loves hockey or not, but knows none of the X's and O's. I guarantee you, because of how he structures things, how he words things, the things that he focuses on, that team would get better because of his leadership, not because of his X's and O's. I'm convinced. Mike Holloway, you put Mike Holloway in charge of a football team, and I don't know if he knows a single crossing path to X block, but I guarantee you that football team would become much, much better because of the people he hires and the way he motivates and inspires young people. We need more. So there's a challenge. If you're listening to this, we need more of the leadership and philosophy of these coaches that are out there. We have our own John Woodens. We have our own Coach K's. I won't compare anybody to Rick Pitino. We probably have some of those too, unfortunately, but we have enough great leaders in this profession of coaching track and field that we've got to have their philosophies on paper for future generations, for sure. Just made me think about that when you mentioned those three.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And there are so many people out there. I mean, that's the confidence I feel like. I think that's why, you can change my disciplines and where I'm coaching. And I do well in every discipline. I have a champion in every discipline, whether at the state conference, level of All-Americans, whatever. It's because I can, I apply the same principles and then just kind of, learn the X's and O's and the techniques as I go, and I kind of apply them.
Let's learn more about that. Where do we get back? Where does track? You're doing basketball.
So I started basketball the very same year. I never left track. I was still running and cycling competitively. So I jumped right in. I jumped right in and started junior high track, and I stayed busy with that. So that kind of was always, I was always there. It never went away. I've always coached track and field. And at some point, now I coached basketball for 13 years, and I finally got a varsity team. In my mind, I thought I was going to advance into a college level program and be a college level coach. I really liked the
basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. But I was still coaching track at the same time. And then my 13th year, right after I got back from Iraq, I took over a very lowly program. I started turning it around, but then I really felt such disdain from the process. It's so cutthroat. And honestly, the parents brought such negativity that disrupted the kids' development as people and as athletes. That was just very disheartening to me. And I decided at that point that I'm not going to be a dual sport coach anymore. And I decided to go with a sport that always treated me right. And at that point, I just went all in for track and cross country.
I'm glad you brought up that your experience there with basketball. What I believe is that we put the past on this pedestal. We think the past was all this just great, amazing perfection, and that today's world or tomorrow's world, so for basketball and other sports, we hear about, parents today, kids today, boy, they're attacking officials today. That has been going on for a long time. I think we're more visible with it today because everybody has a camera and social media account, so we see every one of those. Actually, we don't even see everyone. That's the crazy part. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I just, I just don't like this automatic, the past was great. I don't think it was. I think it happened quite often. Parents were still parents back then. We like to think today, with college scholarships and stuff, the parents are more, boisterous. I'm pretty sure they were pretty competitive and overly competitive back in the day as well. So I appreciate you pointing out that experience.
Yeah, for sure. And I went all in on track. I started an AAU junior Olympic program for the kids in the, in junior high, built that program, and the core of that program ended up being the athletes who I took over at a high school at a varsity level, became my first high school head coaching position. When I took this program over, there was 19 athletes between boys and girls. Most of them were like chess playing potheads, basically, because there was not a culture for track at that school. And built that program. That's what I do so well, as I build programs. And I think I got that from the military, of just, turning something from nothing, into a high performance organization. So when I left there 8 years later, we had 75 kids on the team, had to take 2 buses, right? And we were always one of the top 3 ranked in the state. So, and it was just a really great moment of growth and learning on how to be a track coach. And I had the, I guess, just the autonomy to learn and grow kind of on my own, but I had strong organizational principles. And I think I brought those in just from my military and military leadership experiences, and just applied them as a track coach.
So it's summer, and so a lot of jobs are going to be changing here. And I don't mean just on the college side. There's teachers that are going to go and teach at another district, and they're going to be either become a first-time track coach or change programs for the first time. And invariably, someone's going to come into that same situation that you just described, of like, oh man, I'm a track full-time person. I want to build a program, and I go to this school and there is no program, or the culture of the program. I'm gonna put you on the spot here, Bill. What would, using your experience here, let's leverage that a little bit. What are like the top 3 things that you have to do, and that you did, and maybe specifically in that example, but you've done it in other places as well? Top 3 things that you've got to do to change a track program that is, participatory at best, into a 2 bus load, top 3 type of, so lots of participation, more kids, and at a much higher level. I'm kind of stalling to give you some time to be thinking here, Bill, but what do you think of the, just top 3 things if you're going to change a program around, what are the 3 things that you think they should be focusing on?
I think the first thing is that you have to, I think, establish a connection with the kids in some way. And a lot of that will come by finding a commonality of what is their purpose, what is the reason why they do track in the first place, and then create a vision, what you want this program to look like. And they have to be kind of involved with that. More times than not in track, what I found is that when you're taking over a program or working with kids, is that there is another sport that always has priority, right? It's basketball, it's football, it's whatever, it's soccer. It doesn't matter what it is, but the kids don't feel validated like those athletes seem to be. At least their perception is that they are more valued than the runners are, than the track athletes are. So you kind of say, okay, listen, how would you like to feel valued? I can set you into a program and help you feel valued if you're willing to be a part of it and grow with it and understand, And so I think that's it. You set that vision of culture and what you're trying to achieve right from the beginning. And then you have to kind of look at what you have for athletes, or find some hidden talents in others who don't think that they are jumpers, or who don't think they're distance runners. They just think they're sprinters, or whatever that case may be. That's kind of one of the coaching superpowers I feel I have, and that is, I call it seeing the invisible. And so you have to be able to recognize talents in kids and recognize what their strengths are, and you just build this community around them, and they start, this culture, helping them feel, you're providing for them. They feel like they belong. They feel like, that they're part of something that's important and that's happening. And after a while, they start performing, because they're getting something out of what they're putting into it. I always include into my coaching programs, not just progression in technique, but I see it as a venue. This is probably the teacher in me that I never was, right? This is a venue to teach important and critical life lessons, to prepare these young people to be productive and successful human beings in this very complex world. And I've always felt that way. Even coaching third and fourth graders, I can make them better people because they are part of my life, and I'm better because they're part of mine, you know. And so that has always been the case. At the high school level, it can be a little more, you know, at a higher level, and now at the college level, it's really at a high level of how you can talk to them about what this means and what this looks like. Anyway, I think so. The three things: create the common good. Why are you doing this? Have the vision, and then start, you know, see the invisible, start building the team, and then that all kind of comes together, you know, on its own.
So obviously that worked. You said through 8 years, you started with 19 total kids. Now you're 2 buses and top 3 at conference and regionals. I mean, that's got to make you feel good, and that's got to make the kids feel good. They're contributing to, you know, the greater good, if you will, the team atmosphere. That's awesome.
Yeah, I would say probably over 2/3 of the school records belong to the kids that I coached those 8 years, and most of them still do.
Yeah.
I had D1 athletes out of that program, you know, other college athletes. I had kids who go on to be, you know, be successful in their lives, and you know, and that just really set a great precedent for me. But then I got orders to go and I got deployed to Iraq. And
I was going to ask, well, why leave? Sometimes it's not always our choice, is it?
It's not. So that put a pause in it. I didn't leave high school right away, so that put a pause into it. I would say about 5 years into it. Put a pause into it. My assistants took over for the time that I was gone. I actually only missed one season for the 2 years that I was gone, just the way it worked out. And then, you know, when I came back, though, you know, you go to combat, you see the worst humanity has to offer. But I will tell you that as much as I took, you know, my military experience and my leadership experience and my organizational experience that I had as being part of the military, I brought my coaching experience with me when I got deployed. And that was probably my best example of successful coaching that I've ever done, was when I was deployed, because I was an Army medic, but I was put in charge of the battalion medical section, which turned out to be 54 combat medics and 6 medical officers, doctors and PAs and other medical professionals. And so, but they came from 10 different states. They were of, you know, both men and women, every religious background, ethical background you could think of. Ages were from 18 to 54. You know, I had to pull this team together. We were going to what was called at the time by U.S. News and World Report as the most dangerous place on the planet. And that's where we were going. And we were spearheading the beginning of the liberation of the city of Ramadi in Iraq. And these guys and gals needed to be ready to go. And so I applied a lot of my coaching theories in progression, into, you know, and work ethic and all these, you know, principles into that. And, you know, we kind of went in as this hodgepodge but prepared group of medics. And when we left, we were a pretty renowned group of medics. And for the 13 months that I was in Iraq, we did well over 5,000 medical missions in 13 months. Yeah. You know, our call sign was the Voodoo Medics. And I had a senior enlisted man from we were attached to the Marine Corps, so we were in the fight. And the sergeant major of the Marines came into my medic station one day, and he said, "You Sergeant Edson?" It's like, "Yeah, that's me, Sergeant Major." And he said, "I heard something. I want to know if it's true. The voodoo medics can't save anybody. No one's going to save you. Is that true?" And it's like, "Yeah, that's pretty true." And it was. We had a high rate of survivability when we could get to them. We could get to patients, take care of them, and evacuate them back to the trauma center faster than a helicopter could. So we turned them into, I turned them into kind of a badass team of, medical warriors. And that was, I think, one of the most satisfying coaching jobs I ever did, with a group of creating a culture. And, that whole experience was so profound to me that it made me want to learn more about, I made a lot of really good leadership decisions, but I didn't know why I made them and how it worked. So when I got home, I decided, well, first of all, I got home and I was not the same person. And I had post-traumatic stress. I had other issues that resulted from serving in an austere environment. Was not the same person. Coaching was the last thing. Coaching kids was the last thing I wanted to do. I actually was going to stop coaching. And our youngest daughter, who was going into 9th grade, said, "Dad, will you please just coach track one more year, just 1 year? You've coached all my brothers and sisters. Can you please just coach me 1 year?" And I was not in a really good place at all. Like many veterans that come back from serving in combat, you fight with suicide ideologies and and other depression and anxieties. And I was no different at the time. And she asked me to do that. And just because she asked me to do it, I said, "Yes, I'll do it." And what turned from that was, and I had also was on the verge of retiring. I'd served 23 years. It was just time to retire. And I lost my purpose of service when I retired, didn't realize that. But agreeing to coach brought back this sense of purpose, a sense of service. Literally, this sport saved my life, Mike. It literally saved my life. I thank my daughter for that, for encouraging me to continue coaching. And I'm almost crying. I'm telling you this because it's so true. I love this sport. I have so much to give back to it. And I think that's why I'll probably coach until I can't, like physically can't anymore.
When you talk about going to war, and thank God for myself and for everybody else, I have not ever had that experience. It puts things in perspective. I have no greater love than for the coaching track and field body, but it pales in comparison to what you and the Voodoo crew and hundreds and thousands of others that were out there. But I don't want to necessarily equate it, but that story you talk about with your daughter, and obviously the deep emotional connection you have there of saying that, well, that changed you, that saved my life, because I can never know what it feels like to come back from something like that, the things you've seen and done and had done. No movie can accurately capture it. No, it's you are in the muck or you're not in the muck. But to come back and have your daughter, plead with you of like, just 1 year, give me, I want what my brothers and sisters had. And then to hear you say, that was a turnaround for me, that saved my life. That shows you, I don't know, on one hand, I want to say that shows you the power of track and field and the power of the coaching profession. Mm-hmm. But really it's the power of like hope and love and servitude. That's really what you turned into by coaching your daughter's team. It's like, okay, now instead of myself, I'm gonna think and act for others.
It is, and I learned a lot of profound lessons while I was serving in Iraq, and that's one of them was this power of purpose, this the sense of doing something for a purpose, for a reason beyond yourself. I always say, it's not, as a coach, it's not about you. It's not. If you're doing it to rack up how many wins you can, championships you can win, or how many, I can't tell you how many kids I've coached. I can't tell you how many champions I've produced. I know a lot, on their levels, but that's not why I do it. I do it to change lives and make a difference, for them going forward and prepare them for life. Of course, I want them to be great track athletes. I want them to. That's always a part of it. So I don't use that as an excuse not for them to be, to be as good as they possibly can. So I ended up coaching my daughter for all 4 years in her high school.
So what'd that feel like? You were obviously in a very low and I'm going to use the term bad, and you correct me where
Oh,
I'm
it's fine.
bad part of life. What was it like that first week, month of getting back in there, working with young people? And there's some vitality and energy, receivership from kids like that as well. What was that like as you were in a low place? And this goes back to our comparison of like there is no good without bad, etc. So
Right.
you're certainly in the valley. Was it an immediate peak? Was it an immediate like, oh, okay, thank you, daughter, because this is what I needed? Or did you have to grow into that over a certain amount of time?
Yeah, it was more of a gradual realization. It was a very positive distraction that I had at the end of every work day to be able to go and be with these kids. It wasn't, and I really look forward to it. And I think as I got to know them as people and have, relationships that were meaningful with all of them in one way and just start to have fun again, I started laughing again. I started enjoying life again, it didn't come without, of course, when you go through what I went through, it's, just doesn't go away. I still battle with some of those things now, but you start to feel joy again. And then that brings hope, right? And that just pushes you through those bad days because you've got this at the end of your day to go to,
Yeah.
and so, seeing their victories and how happy it made them because we worked hard. Let me tell you what, I pushed my kids.
Mm-hmm.
They were not successful because of luck,
Mm-hmm.
but that's when I started the promise that I made. I make a promise to all my athletes. I started then after I got back, start realizing, what they can do if they're committed. So I started a promise every season. I don't care if you were on the team before or not, every season, I still do it today. I promise my kids, I promise you that if you are committed to this team and your efforts as much as I am, that you will achieve something that at this moment you think is unachievable.
Mm-hmm.
I promise that. Now, it may not be this season, may take a while to get to that point, but I promise you that is what will happen. I do that now, from now on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty deep, and I think it's meaningful that Coach E is willing to put himself on the line for us and make us better than if he can do it, I can do it for myself. What else can I do? What a life lesson that is within itself, right? And then it goes further. It doesn't have to be in track. It can, and I want the same for your studies. I want the same when you go to school. I want the same when you go home and with your family. I want the same for you when you are seeking your first job, or when every life situation they can apply that to. They'll be better off in the long run, realizing it's not going to be handed to them, but if they're committed, they'll get something good out of it.
What was your experience like coaching your daughter, and coaching your kids in general? That's um, I don't know that I can, like, I think about if my son's is starting to do middle school track, and I'm so glad he's gravitating towards the throws because I did not coach the throws at all. But I've always wondered, like, man, can I not be that dad? Can I just sit back and just be dad and just, as long as there's nothing unsafe going on, let whoever's coaching the way they want to be coached. I don't know if I
Yeah.
can. How was that experience being dad coach?
Yeah, it was good. I just treat all my kids when I coach them kind of like the rest of them. Maybe the expectation of behavior and modeling what a good athlete should do was a little higher than some of the others. But as far as, I never pushed them any harder than the others. I pushed them as hard as they wanted to be pushed.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't overbearing with them. Like when we left practice, the rule was, okay, we got 15 minutes on the way home in the car to talk about practice.
Good,
and then
yeah.
after that, we're going to homework. We're talking about whatever, whatever makes us laugh or whatever is at home.
That's what I was gonna say. I hear this. We've had several, parents of their child before on the podcast, and they say exactly what you just said. I didn't treat them any differently, and I'm like, well, that's bullcrap, because they are different because they're going home with coach.
Yeah.
Every other kid gets to go home and complain to mom or dad about coach made me do X or Y, or I can't believe coach is putting me in this event. They get to just kind of air out their grievances, if you will. Well, the child of a coach gets to go home and possibly can still do that, but you're now talking to the coach as well. As much as you can try to say, well, no, at home I'm dad. No. There's no closet that you throw the coach hat into, and so it's just dad. You're an amalgamation of all these things. So it's not, you may think you're treating them like everybody else, but it is still unique. They are not like everybody else.
They're not, for sure. And I know that they felt a higher expectation from me. And the only place I really wanted the higher expectation was them modeling good team behavior, right? Good, healthy athletic athlete behavior, right? Sportsmanship, the whole thing. Like was my thing for them. I didn't expect them. They didn't have to make state qualifiers. I didn't have those expectations. Most of them did anyway, on their own, but I really wanted them just to go and experience the value of being a part of the track program.
Bill, I'm curious too. I always ask this question almost in every one of our interviews here on the podcast. As you're going through coaching your daughter here, as we're kind of getting back into coaching now, what were you doing up to this point for coaching education? And what I mean by that is formal and informal, meaning formal of like any USATF level ones, things like that, and informal, but just as valuable, a coach, mentor, like someone you would call up and say, hey, I'm having a problem with X, Y, or Z, or hey, I've got to coach the long jump for the first time. Can you help me out? Get us up to speed a little bit on any coaching education that you're doing at this point.
Yeah, and it was about that time too that I realized that I wanted to become, more knowledgeable about the sport itself. So I did do the USATF level training. I did level 1 training. I've done the National Federation training, even, recently, to stay on top of some of those things. But I was really lucky in this, Mike. We shared a track with the local college, Middlebury College.
Oh yeah.
And we had, every day there were professional coaches there, and I befriended them all. In fact, the head coach, Martin Beatty, for a short time was my neighbor. And then he moved, he moved to another house. But I've always maintained a relationship with them and helped them. I would go to their practices and help them out with meets. So I had this built-in set of mentors, with one of the best track programs in Division III, arguably, consistently. And so I had those guys, there, him and the throwing coach, Luke Hutt, who has just developed All-American after All-American out of nowhere. Like these kids, how he gets them to perform, especially in jab and hammer. He's just incredible coach. And Nicole Wilkerson, who is a cross country coach. I mean, they've got like 6 women's cross country national championships there, and runner up positions and all sorts of, and they're part of the NESCAC, which, if anybody knows anything about Northeast sports, NESCAC is so competitive. So they just, they just coach at high levels. And I was just so fortunate to be part of that. But one thing I think that prevented me from doing was seeking mentorship outside of my little bubble. Right.
Sure.
So once my daughter left, Martin actually asked me if I was interested in coaching at the college with him. And I felt it was a natural progression to join the staff. Said, I need a jumps coach. Would you consider coming and being our horizontal jumps coach, helping out with multis? It's like, yeah, definitely, I'd do it. My first year was a volunteer basis, tried to get me a stipend a little bit here and there, but that's not, when you're a coach, as particularly a part-time coach, you're not doing it for the money, Anyway, so I said, yes, I'll come and be a part of your program. And so he sent me to a jumps coach seminar. It was 4 or 5 days in Ottawa. And I go to this thing thinking, like, this is going to be really great. I'm so excited to learn more about triple jump and high jump, and particularly because that was my focus. And I get there, and here I am, a nobody, right? And you know who the people who, well, first of all, it was put on by the Canadian national team, Olympic team. And then the folks who were teaching, and he comes up in every one of your broadcasts, Boo was there.
Oh man, you
He
was
was
in the right
teaching.
place then.
Oh my God. Here it is. Boo Schexnayder, Dan Pfaff was there, and Nelio Mora. Now, Nelio Mora is the national coach for Brazil.
Okay.
And at the time, this was
they've got some pretty good jumpers.
Yeah, a few. And at the time, it was just a couple of months after the London Olympics. So they all came in with this like unbelievable repertoire of stories about the Olympics, and and how they did to prepare these guys to compete. And I'm looking around, and there's the South Korean coach, there's the coach from Australia, here's seriously, there's the Canadian team over there, there's a coach from Syracuse University, there's a coach from Georgetown, hey, there's a coach from United States Military Academy at West Point, and I'm thinking, you're going around the room, hi, I'm Bill, I coach at Middle Bay. Like, holy mackerel, dude. But I learned so much. It was amazing. That's where I learned, in order for me to be at the top of my game, I need to make myself an expert. Whatever assignment I am given, I need to be the expert at that science, at that assignment. So
knowing what we know about you so far, I have a feel, because again, I can see someone in that situation, and there becomes this it's the word I'm looking for here. When you start thinking, oh, well, I'm not, I'm Middlebury, I'm, you start kind of, you kind of cower down a little bit. Like, I can't talk to so-and-so. I can't even I'm not giving my opinion. There's Boo and Dan and the South Korean coach, whatever, yada, yada. Right. But knowing what we know about you so far, I have a feeling you were like, hey, so I've got a question. Hey, so how'd you do this? Like, you had no, some people would say you have no shame. Like, it's like, oh man, I'm here to learn. Well, I better take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah, without question. I definitely had some questions, but what I didn't know, I didn't know. You know what I mean? It's right. So I listened a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And learned from them. And then the questions came from that. And
we've got 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. That's good.
Yeah. And so so I listened a lot and learned a ton from those guys. And one thing that that really resonated with me was, Boo is an extremely brilliant technician. Brilliant. I mean, that as much as I do. I still listen to him on YouTube, and I still look to him for, and I watched that episode with him, a couple of times. And then I listened to Dan, and Dan seemed to be a little less technical and a little more philosophical in his approach. I don't know if that's fair, but that's, at the time, is how I took it. And some of the things that he said resonated with me, and particularly how he dealt with Greg Rutherford, and he won the gold medal that year,
right,
for Great Britain. He was Dan Pfaff was a Great Britain coach for a while, and Rutherford came out of nowhere, and he said, and you wouldn't believe it, he only practices twice a week because that's all his body will allow him to practice. And he was telling the story how he, and it so resonated with me that it's really about, the quality of training, not the quantity, and doing that. Each athlete requires something different to be at their top level. So valuable, and that just resonated with me. And I took that back, if anything, and developed programs within the structure of the team and of the jumps group, but really worked on what does each athlete need. And I think that's what brought the success, within my short stint with Middlebury. I was there for 4 years, and basically took hurdlers and sprinters and turned them into long jumpers. Finally, we started to, before I left, they started to recruit jumpers. And, we got, had a couple of, had an All-American multi-athlete that I was able to coach, and one who was two of them who were all New England, all regional. Some jumpers who made regionals. I had a top 30 female jumper in the nation in long jump, and just turned them into, like, when only 15 people go to conference finals and 8 of them are from Middlebury College, you're doing something right.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You know? So it was really good. It was a really good stint there. And but what I did too, at the same time that I was doing all this, I went back to college because I was so intrigued with this leadership thing. Like, I got to learn more about it so I can apply it more.
Oh, that's right. You never got a degree at this point.
No,
right? You did
no.
your year at Portland. Oh yeah. So
yeah.
You made a commitment to go back to school.
Yeah, I did. So at the same time, I'm working a full-time job and coaching. I went back to college, and I got 3 degrees in less than 5 years.
Wow. What degrees did you get?
So I got an associate's, just a liberal arts associates, and from that I built on and got a bachelor's in professional studies in leadership and human behavior, and from that I went and got a master's of science in organizational leadership.
Yeah, and why did you pick those? There's a lot of other things. You could have done kinesiology. You could have finished out your teaching degree, things like that. Why do you pick those majors?
Well, I was really intrigued with the process and the science of leading people. And I really got that from the military, of doing things the right way. You take leadership courses in the military too. But I learned, what I wanted to really is understand better that why did this work so well and why did this not work? And I really wanted to, I had aspirations of continuing to lead organizations and make them the best organizations they could be. As one thing that I for whatever reason, one thing that I could do is, take an organization or a group of people and turn them into, a good or excellent group of people. In the military, I can remember the first day I was in basic training, the drill sergeant said that I've been given the impossible assignment of turning you guys into something that you're not. Like, I'm supposed to turn chicken scratchings into chicken salad. But he didn't use the term scratchings.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for keeping it PG on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm trying, So that stuck with me. It's like, yeah, I kind of figure I got a knack for that too. So rebuilding programs, rebuilding organizations. I did it in the nonprofits I took over and became executives of these 2 nonprofits. Wherever I landed, I always turned something into better than what it was. It really has added to my personal mantra of leaving this place better than how I found it, meaning our world, our community where we make an impact. And so I went and studied leadership so I could apply these principles and leader skills more deliberately and effectively. And it was amazing.
How do you, leadership is this fuzzy thing out there, extremely valuable. So don't hear me saying it when I describe it that way. But what I mean by that is it's hard to describe. It's easy to see. It's easier to see, harder to describe. What did you learn in the book format, the education format? And then how did you transform that into the actual implementation side of it? You can read about great leaders, you can read about the decisions that they made, but I feel like there's a difference between what you experience leadership wise in the military and then how others have experienced leadership from you as the coach, the implementation side. Talk to me about that. If you agree with me that there's book leadership and then there's the actual transformation of it and be an experiential leadership. How did that occur?
Yeah, it's really true. So during my master's program, we really talked about specific principles and skills. And fortunately, at the time, I was an executive director of an ambulance service that I took from being just a small town volunteer ambulance service and developed it into a professional level regional EMS center. Did that, and I was able to take what I learned at the time and apply it as the chief of this department, and actually practice what I was learning at the same time. So I could actually see, how it did interface, like you're talking about. And I think that was really valuable for me, because otherwise it would have been pretty, I think it would have been just kind of like you're saying, it's kind of a vague thing. But first of all, you have to understand what leadership is, right? Leadership is a process. It's right. It's a process of influencing those around you to meet, a goal, an objective, a mission that otherwise wouldn't be met. But you're influencing them to meet these standards, right? So it's a process, and process is movement. So leadership, I think, is so much seen as like a thing, like a noun. It's not really. It's really a verb. It's movement. Leadership is a process. So you have to keep moving with things. It's how you create this movement that you're going to get the results from. And that movement comes from who else? It comes from the leader. So then you learn leader skills, right, and principles, and you learn how and teach how to apply them.
I like that visual. It kind of changed the way I was thinking about it. When in my head, when I visualize the word leader, I visualize it like a title, like, leader over, a coach's head, or leader on their chest. But the way you describe that it's towards a goal, which means there's movement. So leadership is actually movement. It's an action. Like I kind of got this vision of like the words, the letters of leader, like actual, like they're never standing still. They're always in perpetual motion. I like
Right.
that, the way you described it.
Yeah. So the leader is the facilitator of that movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was so lucky too. I had built such good relationships at Middlebury College before I left there. They invited me in to do some leadership development for their athletic department, which, again, talk about imposter syndrome, much like I kind of felt before I came on with you, seeing your list of guests. There's a who's who of college coaches sitting in the training room when I walk in there, and to meet, my colleagues, my coaching colleagues. But you've got, Bill Beanie, who is a men's hockey coach who has like 9 national championships. You've got the women's college hockey coach who had, I don't know, probably a handful at that time. I think he's won 7 or 8 by now. You've got Martin Beatty, my boss, and Nicole Wilkerson. They've got championships, and the women's cross country's got 6, and I mean there was just, you name it, the basketball coach, the soccer coach, they're all in there. I'm teaching them leadership and leadership skills. What some would call soft skills are really not. They're just real skills. Listening, active listening, and introspection and reflection, and we could go down the line, but it was just a really humbling experience to be able to do that and make a difference. The idea was that we were going to provide developmental skills for the coaches, and then turn that into a leadership development program for athletes, particularly the upperclassmen. So now I can influence those, just be other athletes and young people beyond, track and field and other sports too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what happened though was I ended up leaving because we started having grandchildren, and we had 2 grandchildren in New Hampshire. And my wife and I would visit them all the time. And we're kind of like, why are we driving 2.5 hours every weekend? Why don't we just pick up and go? Move? And we did. I had a really good job offer. I took over a struggling agency that gave support to military veterans. And that seemed like a really good fit. Wow, and I knew I could find some place to coach. And I ended up coaching at the local high school. And so we moved. Now, since then, in hindsight, now we have 9 grandchildren, and some of them are back in Vermont. So I don't know, whatever. But
how is that? This is a kind of a personal question. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that my son and daughter do not listen to this podcast, because if they do, this will ruin a surprise. So as you and I are recording today, Bill, on June 12th, my in-laws, their grandparents are, I mean, almost, it just hit me when you said 2.5 hours. So they're in Chicago, we're in Champaign. That's 2.5 hours essentially. They're moving down to my area, to Muhammad, to be. They're like, man, everybody's traveling. We got a limited time with these kids before they don't want to be with their grandparents. Those kind of things. And so they're moving to Muhammad, and I'm so happy, so blessed that the grandparents will be involved in their lives. How was that for you though? Like, how did the grandkids receive it? How did it meet expectations from grandma and grandpa? And tell me more. But this is kind of like, this ain't even the podcast anymore. This is just curious for my own personal, because they moved down. Like I said, it's the 12th, 18 days. Yeah, the 30th. So 18 days. So less than 3 weeks. They'll be there. And the kids have no idea, by the way. It's going to be a surprise, which is even more fantastic. How was that? How did it meet expectations?
I think it exceeded any expectation that we had. And I think the reason being is that we didn't invade their territory. We were just closer to be more involved.
Yes.
And we kind of let them set that tone.
Okay.
Right. We didn't just show up. We didn't just say, hey, I'm coming over.
I'm going to clip this and send this to my in-laws.
Yeah, I think that would be the advice I give them, is just to be available.
Yeah.
Build that relationship as it, let it grow. As you're available and as you want them to be there. Yeah. Excuse me. And so it's been really, it's been terrific. Those grandchildren, they're our oldest grandchildren now. One is just getting ready to go into high school. She'll be 14 soon. Wow. And so we've been with them, ever since they were little. So, okay, good. Most of their lives.
I'm super excited. I just, I don't know that I have any reservations either. They're not overly involved in-law. So it's not like, the typical in-law, son-in-law battle, that you stereotypically see on like TV and things like that. Like, I love my father-in-law and mother-in-law very much so. So I'm very supportive and everything. And to me, it's less about, whatever my feelings might be, and more about like, oh man, they get to be in the grandkids' lives. And I just think that's a good thing. I don't know how it can be a bad thing. They're good people, so it can only be a good thing to see, experiences and be able to share in the aging process through it as well, and not from afar.
Yeah,
time is great. In person is better.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. We try to see all of our grandkids. It is difficult, even though we're all in New England now.
Yeah, well, nine is different too.
my daughter, who got me back into coaching.
Yeah.
Who was in ninth grade, going into ninth grade. Now she just had her fourth baby.
Oh, and my.
Yeah, they were living in Tennessee for a while. She went to school at Murray State University.
Oh yeah, the Racers, yeah.
Her husband was in the Army at Fort Campbell, and he got out of the Army. They stayed down there for a while. Excuse me. But they just recently moved back up here. They're in New Hampshire, about an hour and a half away.
Oh, cool.
So we're seeing those babies more.
Yes.
And we try to meet up with the folks who are still over in Vermont. So it's a bit of a scheduling conundrum at times, but it is just so nice that we are all now in the same region. We can get together more regularly. Yeah, so it's really cool to have that just kind of come full circle.
All right. Well, it is the Gill Athletics Connection podcast, not the Mike Cunningham one. Let's go back. You find yourself coaching high school again.
Yeah. You know what? Saddest day of my life, and I had to get back on one of those yellow buses.
Well, okay. I'm glad you said that. Not that that's a terrible segue, but I was going to ask, how was your ego? Because, it's easy for us to fall in the trap of, I'm a college coach. It's quote unquote more important to coach college kids, or more valuable, or more perceived valuable than it is to coach high school kids. I don't believe that at all. But some do. How did it feel going back to coaching high schoolers and getting back on that yellow bus? Exactly.
Yeah, well, it was the bus part that was the sad part, not the coaching. Coaching the youngsters. You just have to dial it down, understand they're not at the level. I'm coaching athletes at Middlebury College, one of the most esteemed academic institutions at the Division III level. These kids are wicked smart, a lot more smart than I was probably, but they didn't want to just know what the workout was. They want to know why they were doing it. like specifically, how is this helping me?
Right.
It made me retool my game at a level that was very, a very high level of coaching and knowledge. So I really enjoyed that challenge. And I really found that that was the level that I was most effective at. So leaving there, I was sad, but I was leaving for all the right reasons, excuse me again. Anyway, getting back, still valuable, and to bring the same philosophy of this is a venue to teach important life lessons and help kids realize, achieve the unachievable is such a lesson within itself. I did that when I was an assistant coach doing the jumps at the local high school. So it was just, there really wasn't an ego thing, but it just wasn't as challenging.
Yeah, sure.
But it was still satisfying, right? I was still coaching, and kids were getting something out of it they otherwise they wouldn't have. Kids are qualifying for state championships that otherwise wouldn't have. Some really, really great positive relationships came from it. But I had to board the yellow bus. Now, Middlebury College is, they travel in a very comfortable manner because they're a private institution. All coaches, overnight stays, it was just, I loved getting on the bus to go to overnight meets with the team, because you just felt like, you made the big time. In fact, I finally did make a national championship, went with the cross country team to nationals one year. So my dream of going to national championships as a coach back when I was basketball came to fruition as a cross country coach. So that was so cool. Anyway, I left. I was there for 3, almost 4 years. Pressure from my job was mounting not to coach. So I kind of had to make a decision not to coach, and decided, like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to take some time off, because work isn't going to let me go to meets, and not going to let me leave early for practices. And, so it was like, so I stopped coaching very briefly, but then quickly picked it back up because I had lost my job. And so I'm sitting around feeling sorry for myself, and I'm flipping channels and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And I thought, I wonder if there's any coaching jobs around. And I came across a great documentary about high school team, the Long Green Line.
Oh, York.
Yes, York. Yes,
Joe Newton.
Yes, Joe Newton.
My first coaching job was in Chicago versus York, so I've read that book. Come on, it's semi-famous nationally, but certainly culturally in the Chicagoland Midwest. Joe Newton is, God rest his soul, an absolute legend. Another person that would write a book, that we should have a book about his philosophy, because he had a very unique philosophy that was very successful, and it certainly pointed on the Long Green Line.
Yes.
Hundreds of kids on his teams, and how he treated them, and how he got them out on the team. Absolutely. Yeah. You saw the documentary on Coach Newton.
I did, and it just inspired me. So I thought, maybe there's some coaching, there's a coaching job available. And I looked around, and that's when I found, just down the road, small high school down the road, Conant High School, where I coached for almost 5 years. Well, had an opening, and I just sent an email to the athletic director, say, hey, I'm interested in coaching. I see you need a coach for cross country this fall. Here it is, July, I think. Oh, wow. I mean, it's coming up quick. Yeah. And he said, I'd love to hire you. And after a 20-minute conversation, I was hired as the next, I can't say hired, because he had to go through the routine, but he committed to hiring me, and was willing to give me also the indoor and outdoor track programs.
Oh boy, that's a lot.
Yeah. So I went from nothing and dove into everything.
Right.
Took those programs over. At that time, they were all pretty, they were struggling programs, and took those programs from, let's just put it this way, my vision was that we were going to hang a banner by the time I left there, that we were going to win a championship. They had never won a cross country championship. And the last time they won track and field was 20 something years before that. So that was a vision. I put it out there. That's what brought people together. They have very strong basketball traditions there, and the kids weren't feeling, again, this is what we talked about. So we pulled them in, created a core group of interested people, and just 4 years later, the boys team won their first state championship in track and field in 25 years, where when I started, they scored 0 points 4 years earlier. The cross country team, I think the best they did was 9th or 10th, and they finished second and third twice. The women's team did really well too, finished third a couple of times. And, I just brought it to a whole new level. Got athlete scholarships, and, we put 3 people into top 10 in the state decathlon championship. We have 1st, 3rd, and 10th. And I mean, just did some amazing things, and for those kids,
short amount of time.
Yeah, in a very short amount of time, because we're all, but I was all in on it. I mean, all in. I was putting more time into that program than I was putting into my day job. Part of the reason was I didn't have a day job to start with, set this precedent that I had to maintain once I got one. But then COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody had a day job.
Right.
Track was put on the back burner, no meets, no nothing. I had a very, I guess, favorite team that was, positioned to win a state title for the women's side, the girls team in track, and they got it yanked out from under them. And, they were, a lot of the kids, the seniors who missed their senior year, were suffering. And I recognized that. So I decided to put together a webinar for all athletes. I opened it up, advertised in a short period, 2 to 3 weeks. Had about 100 people join from all, mostly regional, but I had some, throughout the United States. Put together a panel of folks to speak about, that this isn't over, that this isn't the end. Let's talk this thing through. Let's reassure you that, as defeated as you feel now, that this is only one part of your journey that will likely make you stronger as you progress in your life. So it's really, really interesting people on the panel. I had Don Page, 800-meter champion.
Oh yeah, good friend. Yeah.
And I brought him and asked him to come on. He did it. He didn't know me from anybody. I didn't know him, but I can remember him from my high school days. Mm-hmm. He was on the 1980 Olympic team that got the rug pulled out from under them for the boycott.
Yep.
And he came and told his story and reassured the kids that,
talk about something without, everything out of his control, no control over that. Yeah, that's a great analogy.
And that was the premise, was control what you can control. Like, this is the name of it was the Your Greatest Comeback or something was the name of it. So he was there. Thomas Velez was there. I don't know if you know who Thomas Velez is. Thomas Velez, if you've watched the movie McFarland USA.
I haven't, but I know it. Yeah.
So it's a cross-country movie based on Mexican-American immigrants, and Coach Tom White, who took this program and turned it into a championship program for cross-country. And anyway, Thomas was portrayed as the leading actor in the movie. He was the runner who was featured in the movie, and he also coaches out in California. And the reason I brought him on was that people recognized him in that world, in our little community, but that even people in California, and his daughter, who was in high school, are going through the same thing as you. Mm-hmm. Right? It's not just us.
Right.
This is broad. How are you coping with it? What's happening out there that, and I brought on a couple college coaches, and actually had a country singer come and sing a song, and so it was really good. It was wow. I mean, it was fun. And
you're like variety hour there.
It was kind of was. So that's cool. It was like 90 minutes of just great information. I just talked about really the systemic, why you feel this way, like systemically, like scientifically, why do you feel sad that this is happening? How can you, push back against this emotion? so I kind of talked about that part of it, but I got the most boring part to talk about, but I thought it was good. Knowledge is power. So, but it was Don's story that was the best. And he talked about Jumbo was like, listen, he goes, I know you're upset because I think he just finished qualifying for the Olympic team when they found out the trials.
Yeah.
He was he was upset. He said, listen, you got 15 minutes to get over this. And then we have to look at where we can go, what we can control. What's our new goal?
Yeah.
And it was, and he went off and he ended up winning world championships, right? And he had the best time in the world that year. And, it was an amazing story.
Bill, we're getting close to our time. Are you okay with everything?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm good.
I would love to, as we start to wrap up here, though, move into this position at Keene. And you're coaching a new thing now at Keene as well. You're continuing to, even at your age and stage now, Bill, you continue to evolve and adapt. Tell us a little bit about your position there at Keene.
Yeah, almost 31 years into it. And, I've thought a couple of times about leaving and being done, and just something else happens that just revs me back in, pulls me back in, and just reminds me how much I love this.
I feel less like it pulls you back in, Bill, and I feel more of like you are continuing to run towards it, my friend.
That's probably.
I was like, I don't know, that's not true. You are running towards this thing, man.
Yeah, that's probably true. So I just knew it was time to leave Conant. I had done everything I could do there. It was just time to leave. They just needed a fresh vision there, I think, and so at the time, I know Keene was looking for a coach, and I reached out. I ran into Dan Rourke, the head coach, there a couple of times while I was still coaching at Conant. And I just said, hey, Dan, is there anything available? I mean, I'd love to think about continuing to coach at the college level. And he said, yeah, sure. So we talked about they had an opening for a throws coach. I hadn't had a coach there in probably 3 years for throws specifically. Asked if I would come in, and so I accepted the challenge. It was just a moment of growth, and threw myself back into it again, becoming the expert. Signed up for Throws University, and subscribed to Throws Universe, and watched a lot of videos and read a lot of books, and just I talked to my buddy Luke back at Middlebury, and being and trying to become the expert in that, in that niche. And I had some really good success as a throws coach in high school. So I found it an interesting challenge. So I took over throws, and I'm helping out with multis as well, because I have that background. Right. We're working really hard to, I think, increase our presence as a multi-school, and we're building, and Dan has done such a good job recruiting and bringing levels of interest back up, and the idea is to build that program back to what it used to be 10, 15 years ago. We're doing a pretty good job there. And my first group of throwers, I started with 5 and finished with 14. And 6 new school records, 2 conference champions, and we had the third ranked women's shot put squad in New England, behind MIT and Springfield. And that's not too shabby,
pretty good ones. Yeah.
5 months of work. So I'm looking forward to what this brings, but that brings new challenges too, because now the expectation is high. So, yeah, it's all good. It's all a good thing. And I love being back at the college level. I feel like I belong there. There's great positive energy. I connect well with the athletes, and that's what it comes down to. So
as you look towards next season, and casting vision out there for 3, 4, or 5 seasons from now, what's got you excited there at Keene State, and maybe specifically about your part of the program and your involvement?
Yeah, for sure. So I think we want to use the multi-interest to build and bring just well-rounded athletes into the program that can contribute at the team level at conference. It's really the conference is the kind of the focus right now. So we will, the throwers have been kind of the prolific scorers and which is really a great thing because it's usually the lack of depth at the field events that limit your performance at a big meet. So we kind of have strong field events. We've bolstered our jumps. We're bringing in pole vault full-time next year. And that's, with the multis, I'm sure I'll be involved with that.
Sure.
I'm a pole vault certified coach, but that's the worst event, and I don't enjoy coaching it. But we all have those events, not our favorites. But that will be part of, the rebuild, and the rebuild is to be predominant conference team. We're working on establishing facilities, and just raising the program a level. And I think next year it's like, again, let's look for conference champions. Let's look for records. Let's look for things that we can attain. And, I think I have at least one athlete who has a shot at making nationals next year. I had one this year, but she graduated, so she won't be returning. She helped to set a really strong standard going forward. But that's okay, because the others now are willing to try to fill those shoes. It's not foreign territory
right.
All. So it's okay. Who's going to step up? Who's the next one? And so, it's just constant improvement, right? Forward motion. All good change happens when things are moving forward. So that's what we're looking, that's what I'm looking to do. So
it's amazing what happens when you set the expectations higher and higher every year. You kind of, I imagine, through your leadership training and some goal setting, you probably have learned about, you have to have that big moonshot, but you have to have stages in between that as well. And you can't have one without, properly, you can't have one without the other. If you have those stages and you don't have a moonshot, well, you don't get as high as you could have. And if you only have the moonshot, well, it becomes disillusion, because you're not hitting that moonshot. You're not hitting these stages in between. I always think about this vision of a ladder. Like, you got to hit each rung. Ladder has many, many rungs to get to the very, very top. It doesn't just have the very, very top. You got to have them all.
Right.
There.
Right.
Well, Bill, man, thank you. As we wrap up here today, thank you for many things. Again, I'm always just so humbled and blessed when anybody can come and spend 2 hours. Again, I've said this many, many times. This is not an easy podcast to record for, to be a guest on, nor to listen to it. So, dear listener, thank you for still being here. I know this is tough. We're at our hour and 50-minute mark. It's always worth it, though, isn't it? For everybody who always goes to the end, it's always worth it. And I tell you what, for anybody who doesn't believe it, I have the stats to show that the majority of listeners who press play on this podcast make it to the end. And I'm just so humbled that you would make it to the end. So, Bill, thank you for your time today. And honestly, one very easy thing to say thank you for is your service. Again, guys like me I can never make that sacrifice, and just so grateful for what you've done for our country and what you've done for other people selflessly. You represent millions and millions of people, and have served each and every one of them. So appreciate that. And also just so thankful, from the very bottom of my heart, of your openness and authenticity. I tell people that, the guest always directs the conversation. They are allowed to talk about what they want or don't want to talk about. So, Bill, when you share, really personal, really low moments of your life, I'm just so thankful, because those are the type of things that other people need to hear. When I talk about preserving the knowledge of Jumbo Elliott's and Joe Newton's and things like that, those are for a lot of people, those are our John Woodens and Coach K's and what have you. It starts with things like this. We have to have open, authentic conversations, truthful conversations. And, I think you did an amazing job of representing yourself, your family, your grandkids, for crying out loud. So special. And so I'm just so thankful for everything you've given us today here on the podcast, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks. You're welcome. It's just an honor to be a part of it. And I will say that I'm coming up to my planned retirement from real jobs because I'm going to start getting my military retirement benefits. soon, within 6 months or so. And I say that because that's going to allow me to do even more.
Oh,
right.
good.
But I do want to start teaching some and offering classes in development and leadership.
Yeah.
I would like to focus on coaches. That would be an incredible thing to do. I'm going to come out with my second book about leadership. I actually have one out there that I wrote during COVID, kind of as a personal challenge. That's kind of funny in itself.
Yeah.
So that I still feel like the best is yet to come, and I just am so appreciative of this sport, as I spoke of, this platform that you have created. You're doing it the right way. The connections is so important. And I just, and I really do appreciate being a part of this list. It's just so humbling to me. So just keep up the good work. You've got a lifetime viewer on this end for sure. I listen to one or two a day, because the list is so long. It's like, I'm not going to run out. I will eventually, but
eventually you get caught up, right? Yeah. And that's an important thing for listeners to hear too. Maybe this is your first, second, 10th time listening to the podcast. So humbled. Appreciate that. I deeply am concerned of guest number 1 through 50 and 50 through 100, because it's easy to, when you join the podcast here in episode 200 or 212, to not think about going back to the beginning. And I'm not saying you necessarily need to go back and listen to the entire catalog. That would take you a whole career maybe on its own. But there are guests, back to number 1, that will challenge you, will encourage you. And I think of Mouse Holloway, who just won the Division I title here in Austin. I think of George Williams. I think the Harvard crew had several of the Harvard coaches, including the great Kaba Tolbert on the podcast, Mark Mangiacotti, Chris Parno. Just amazing people. Bob Thurnhofer, Sue Humphreys has been on the show. Just truly, truly amazing people who choose to be track coaches. And I just want people to just go back, use your podcast app, just keep swiping. It'll take you a little bit, but keep swiping till you get to number 1 and just start looking for people and what schools they're at, people maybe you already know. Look in the show notes of just, what we talked about. I just know there are more people already on the podcast that will challenge and encourage you, and you need it. We need it. We need to continue to showcase these individuals who choose to be track coaches, and just uplift and honor them, because what they do for young people is immeasurable. We'll never be able to quantify what these men and women do for our young people, and therefore for society. You've heard me say it. Almost none of these coaches are going to coach someone who will make a living of performing track and field. Like, there's just not a lot of money in professional track and field, and then the talent level there is just infantile, right? But what they are doing, what Bill is doing, what past guests have done daily, is create the future moms and dads of this world, future business owners, future doctors and lawyers, of course, things like that, future teachers, future coaches. And that is what is changing society for the better. And that is the impact. Like I said, you'll never be able to quantify it, because it's literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that are in their tree as they go along and do the world a favor and bring positivity and gratitude into there. So, Bill, thank you so much again. Really grateful for you. For you guys and gals that are still here, appreciate you listening. Thank you very much for being here this week. We're going to do it all over again next week, and we'll find the next coach to uplift and honor and share their unique journey. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.